Okay, welcome back to part two of September 3rd's lesson. So hopefully you finished reading and annotating through the tunnel. And now we're going to talk more about it and talk about linear plot. What is a linear plot? A linear plot consists of a series of events that have a clear beginning, middle, and end. Stories with a linear plot are told in chronological order or the order in which they occurred in time. So if the story started in 1987 and ended in 2005, then it's going to follow that chronological year order. You guys have all seen a linear plot chart, okay? And number one on the chart, the very beginning of the story, is called the exposition. And then you have the rising action. It moves to the climax, then the falling action, then the resolution. Now, these slides are super important because this slide will help you answer 5 of the questions that are on the first page of your worksheet, okay? So remember, these slides are available underneath the videos. There's a little picture of the slide that you can click on and it'll open up the slides to look just like this. Linear plot chart review. What is an exposition? An exposition is the beginning of a story that introduces the characters, setting, background info, and historical context. The rising action introduces the conflict, which starts with an inciting incident and begins to intensify. The climax is where the conflict reaches its highest point of drama or tension. It's the turning point in the story. So it's when it's like the most tense. In a falling action, it's when the tension in the story starts to lessen. And then the resolution is the conflict ends and all remaining issues have been resolved. So let's look at the plot chart of Through the Tunnel. Now pay special attention to what's put in the plot chart because remember, you are going to have a test Friday, and one of the questions on your test is going to talk about being able to summarize. So we're going to want to figure out main points, okay? The exposition. The exposition in Through the Tunnel is when Jerry and his mother go to the beach. She stays on the safe beach. He goes to swim in the wild bay. He feels guilty for leaving her. She feels overprotective of him. In the rising action, 2 conflicts start. There's an internal conflict where Jerry feels he needs to prove to himself he's not a child. Then there's the external conflict where Jerry physically struggles to swim through the tunnel. Jerry does a lot of work and self-training to get ready to swim through the tunnel. Okay, when he does all this self-training, that's during the rising action. Then the story reaches the climax. Jerry sees the light within the tunnel and realizes he has not reached the end yet. So he thought he made it to the end of the tunnel, but he didn't. Right? It was just a light coming through a crack in the rock and he still had a ways to go. That's when the story starts to get really chaotic and he starts to kind of feel, he said he feels like he's dying and he's really suffering and trying to make it. During the falling action, Jerry makes it out of the tunnel and onto land. Over time, the symptoms he was feeling while swimming start to lessen. So his nose stops bleeding, his head stops pounding. He goes home and goes to bed. In the end, Jerry no longer feels he needs to struggle against his mother and complies when he says she shouldn't swim that day. Okay, so all the conflicts are resolved. He's made it out of the tunnel. He's no longer in danger, and he no longer feels this need to prove himself to himself. He's already proved himself. Okay, so this part of the slide is going to help you answer questions on page 1 of your worksheet as well, or page 2 of your worksheet. Okay, on page 1, the bottom half, this part will help you. This is page 2. Okay, and now we're going to talk about nonlinear plot, and these slides will help you with page 3. A nonlinear plot consists of a series of events told out of chronological order, often using flashbacks, foreshadowing, subplots, and parallel plots. A flashback is when the author introduces a scene later in the story than when it actually happened. This is kind of like a memory. In foreshadowing, the author hints at something to happen in the future. It's kind of a subtle hint. He's not necessarily going to come out and say what exactly is going to happen. He's not going to give all the details, but the author is going to tell you that something is going to happen in the future, a specific thing. A subplot is a side story that exists within the main plot. It's connected to the main plot, but never overpowers it. An example of this is in Cinderella. The main plot is a story about Cinderella's life, going to the ball, etc. The subplot is a little side story about all the antics of the mice, when they steal the key, when they make her dress, all the things that the mice are doing behind the scenes. In a parallel plot, it's when there's an additional plot that develops alongside the main narrative of a story. Parallel plots are linked by a common character and similar theme. So an example here is in Finding Nemo. You have the main plot telling the story of Marlin trying to find his son. And then the parallel plot is telling the story of Nemo trying to get home. The actions of these plots are occurring at the same time and even meet up in the end. In other stories, they might meet up several times and then stray apart again and then come back together toward the end as well. Now, our story was not a nonlinear plot. Our story was a linear plot, okay? However, this story could have been written as a nonlinear story. Doris Lessing could have used nonlinear devices to tell this story. For example, she might have had an adult Jerry relate this experience as a memory of his childhood. He could have been telling a friend or something that this happened to him. So the beginning of the story would have been him saying, well, when I was a child, and then he would tell the story. Explain how the linear plot structure adds to the story's effect, including in its suspense. So when you're telling a memory, things have already happened, right? All of the feelings of that memory, they're gone now. Like what you felt during that time isn't as intense. But when you tell a story in a linear way, nobody knows what's coming. There's no foreshadowing. There's no flashing back, nothing like that. So how does telling a story without things like foreshadowing, how does it build suspense? Okay, that's what you're answering here. The linear plot structure Doris Lessing chose adds to the story's effect by, and then you tell me, by helping create suspense. Suspense is created because nobody knows what's going to happen next. There's no foreshadowing, something like that, okay? You need to use complete sentences. When you answer all of your questions, this is what your worksheet looks like. Okay, here's page 1. You're going to click in the box, all right, and you're going to erase, and then you're going to type your answer. This is exposition, right? Let me just put this back. And then down here, what is the exposition? I expect you to use complete sentences and also write in such a way that you state part of the answer in your question. So what is the exposition? The exposition is, and then continue telling me. What is the rising action? The rising action is, and then tell me, okay? On this one, you're going to start answering questions specific to the story. So these questions, you're just defining these words for me. You're defining exposition, rising action. But here, we're going to look at those pieces of the plot in through the tunnel. So what hints of conflict between Jerry and his mother appear in the story's exposition? In the story's exposition, the conflict between Jerry and his mother is, or the hints of conflict between Jerry and his mother are, and then tell me what they are. What is the story's main conflict? The story's main conflict is, and then don't forget to answer this second question. So this is going to take at least 2 sentences. Okay, what inciting incident starts this conflict? So what does he see that starts this conflict, right? What happens that starts the conflict? What stage of the plot includes details of Jerry's training? Now remember those slides. This answer, is on the slide. So you're going to say the stage of the plot that includes details of Jerry's training is, okay? So we need to make sure that when we're answering these questions, we use part of the question in your answer, and do complete sentences. On this third page, you're just going to define flashback, foreshadowing, subplot, and parallel plot. And down here is where you answer the question on this last slide. Okay. When you're answering these questions, do not copy word for word off my slides. You need to put things into your own words. Okay, so I can see that you understand. So make sure that you're writing in complete sentences and putting it in your own words. If you are confused or have any questions or need any help, don't forget to reach out to me. Okay, I'm going to leave these sentence starters in a couple of these. I'll even put it in this one down here, the linear plot structure. Okay. Oh, it is here. So it's here for you to copy. Okay. You just copy the beginning of the sentence, then finish the sentence. You're going to want to explain to yourself. So I've left a big box here where you can write a good explanation. It might take 2 to 3 sentences to explain. All right. So that is it for today. So you've finished reading the story. We've learned about linear, nonlinear plot, and now you are going to go explore linear plot in Through the Tunnel, and also think about how it would have been if it was nonlinear and why linear is the best choice. Okay? So go to Google Classroom and complete your work. I hope everybody's having a great day. We're so close to a 3-day weekend. All right, just one more day to get through. See y'all later.